Have you ever seen hunger in a child's eyes? Not for toys, but for a piece of bread? Imagine knocking on a door, not for help with homework, but because your stomach has been empty for 2 days. What would you do if the only person you trusted was your teacher? This is the story of a boy who had nothing, but found kindness when he least expected it, and what happened next touched millions of hearts around the world. 12-year-old Armin lived in a quiet, forgotten neighborhood on the edge of the city. The houses were made of patched bricks, old tin roofs, and walls that held more stories of survival than comfort. His family had always struggled, but things got harder when his father lost his job at the factory. Days turned into weeks, and the noise of hunger became louder than the laughter that once filled their small home. Armin was the oldest of 3 siblings. His little brother Rafi was 6, and his sister Sana was only 4. Their mother stitched clothes by hand late into the night, earning just enough to pay rent and buy a bag of rice that never seemed to last. There were days when dinner was just boiled water with salt, and nights when silence replaced conversation, because hunger made speaking painful. Every morning, Armin wore the same faded uniform to school. It hung loosely on him now, not because he had grown taller, but because he had grown thinner. He tried to hide his empty lunchbox so no one would ask questions. While other children unwrapped sandwiches, fruits, and snacks, he would pretend to sleep during recess or quietly walk to the schoolyard to drink water and fill his stomach with hope. But there was one person who always noticed, Ms. Zainab, his homeroom teacher. She was kind, soft-spoken, and attentive. She often saw Armin staring at other kids' food, not with jealousy, but with quiet longing. Sometimes she asked him if he had eaten, and he always gave the same polite smile and whispered, "Yes, teacher." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. One Friday afternoon, while the other kids rushed home, Armin stayed behind to help her clean the classroom. He picked up wrappers and straightened desks, hoping she wouldn't notice how weak he had become. When she offered him a biscuit from her drawer, he took it with trembling hands, muttered a "thank you," and slipped it into his pocket instead of eating it. She gently asked, "Why didn't you eat it?" He replied in a quiet voice, "My sister likes biscuits." That night there was no dinner at home. The rice was finished and there was no money left. His mother sat silently in the dim light, pretending she wasn't crying. Rafi and Sana slept early, their hunger tucked under thin blankets. Armin lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of what to do. The next morning, he left home without breakfast. His legs felt heavy and his stomach burned with emptiness. It was Saturday, no school, but he wasn't going to play or rest. He was going somewhere he had never gone before, driven by desperation and the image of his siblings sleeping hungry. He walked through the streets with dry lips and tired eyes until he stood in front of a small blue house with white curtains. It was his teacher's home. With courage heavier than his hunger, he lifted his hand, and he knocked. The sound of his knock was soft, almost hesitant, as if he was afraid the door might open. For a moment he thought about running. What if she was angry? What if she rejected him? What if she saw him differently after this? But before he could step back, the door opened. Ms. Zainab stood there, surprised but gentle. Her eyes widened when she saw him, hair uncombed, face pale, lips dry. "Armin?" she said softly. "Is everything okay?" His throat tightened. He tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. "I'm sorry for coming." She stepped aside immediately. "Come inside." He hesitated, wiping his feet as though he worried about dirtying the floor. Her home was simple, just like her, but warm, filled with the smell of freshly cooked roti and lentils. The scent hit him like a wave, and his eyes began to water. She guided him to the small dining table. "Sit," she said gently. "Tell me what happened." He looked down at his hands, twisting his fingers nervously. For a minute there was silence. Then, with a trembling voice, he said, "There's no food at home." Each word felt like a weight he had been carrying for months. "My brother and sister. They haven't eaten since yesterday." Her heart broke right there. She didn't ask more questions. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and returned with a plate of warm food, rice, lentils, bread, and a glass of water. But Armin didn't eat. He looked at the food and whispered, "Can I take this home? For them?" That single sentence made her eyes fill with tears. "Armin," she said softly, sitting beside him, "you will eat first. Then we will pack food for them. You don't have to feel ashamed." But he shook his head. "Please, they're small. They're hungry." She understood. She carefully packed 3 full meals into containers, added fruit, biscuits, and even a bottle of milk. Then she placed another plate in front of him and gently said, "Eat here, so you have strength to take this to them." He finally took a bite, and then another, and then tears began to roll silently down his cheeks. He didn't cry from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of feeling human again. As he ate, her husband entered the room. He looked surprised at first, but listened quietly as she explained. Instead of reacting with discomfort, he began preparing more food, larger portions, fresh rotis, and a bag of groceries to send with Armin. Yet not everyone was kind. A neighbor walking by saw Armin leaving with the bags and whispered to another, "These poor families always take advantage." Someone else muttered, "Teachers get fooled easily." But Ms. Zainab didn't care. She walked him to the gate, carrying the bags herself, ignoring the stares and judgmental looks. Armand kept his eyes on the ground, afraid of what people might think. That night, the world was still cruel outside, but inside one teacher's house, kindness had begun something powerful. On Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, there was another knock, but this time, it wasn't Armin, it was his teacher. She stood outside his small home with 2 large bags of groceries and freshly cooked food. His mother, surprised and embarrassed, tried to apologize, saying, "We didn't want to burden anyone." "He went without telling me," but Ms. Zainab held her hand kindly. "You're not a burden. You're a family that needed help." She placed the food on the table, rice, vegetables, lentils, eggs, milk, flour, fruit, enough for days. She noticed the cracked plates, the bare shelves, and the children hiding behind the curtain with wide, hopeful eyes. She knelt down and spoke to them gently. "Are you hungry?" Rafi and Sana nodded shyly. She smiled and served them warm food herself as if they were her own children. Armand watched, unable to speak, his heart full, his eyes wet. He had expected maybe a meal. He had never imagined someone would step into his world with such compassion, but the kindness didn't end there. On Monday morning at school, something unexpected happened. During assembly, Ms. Zainab spoke with the principal about starting a school meal fund, a quiet initiative to ensure no child went hungry. She didn't mention Armin's name, but everyone understood the importance when she said, "Sometimes a child needs more than books to learn. Sometimes he needs bread, hope, and someone who sees him." Teachers donated. Parents volunteered. Within days, a system was created where children who came without lunch were given meals discreetly, without shame, without attention. Meanwhile, the story of a teacher helping a hungry child reached social media through a parent who witnessed her actions. A single post with a simple caption, "A teacher didn't just teach today. She saved a life," began to spread. People shared it, commented on it. Some were moved to tears. Others donated anonymously to support the meal program. Within a week, local shops, bakeries, and restaurants began sending food to the school regularly. Armand became stronger. He started smiling again, raising his hand in class and helping others quietly. His siblings were healthier, and his mother found part-time work through someone who heard the story and wanted to help. One afternoon, as he stayed back to clean the classroom again, he whispered to Ms. Zainab, "Why did you help me?" "When others looked away?" She smiled and replied, "Because hunger should never silence a child, and kindness should never wait to be asked." What she didn't know was that someone had recorded that quote and shared it online, and that one sentence became a message of hope around the world. Sometimes, the smallest knock carries the heaviest pain, but one act of kindness can turn that knock into a miracle. Not all heroes wear capes. Some open their doors with compassion. Hunger may weaken the body, but kindness feeds the soul. And when one heart cares, the whole world listens.